On January 19, 1995, an elderly woman died alone in her one-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Her name was Anne Scheiber. She was 101 years old. She had lived in that same rent-controlled apartment for 50 years. Her furniture was decades old. Her dresses had been repaired and restitched countless times. The few neighbors who recognized her thought she was a poor old widow surviving on Social Security. When her estate was settled, the world discovered something staggering. Anne Scheiber, the woman who lived on virtually nothing for half a century, had quietly built a fortune of $22 million. She left all of it to Yeshiva University with one specific instruction. It must be used as scholarships for women. Anne never told a single person what she had built. Today I'm going to tell you how she did it. Anne Scheiber was born in Brooklyn in 1893 to a family of modest means. She was the third of 9 children. She put herself through college and law school, eventually earning her degree from George Washington University Law School in 1928. She was brilliant. She was meticulous. She was relentless. And she was a woman in 1930s America. In 1944, Anne joined the Internal Revenue Service as an auditor. Despite holding a law degree and consistently producing top-tier audit work for over 2 decades, Anne was never promoted. Not once. While her male colleagues with inferior credentials and weaker performance advanced steadily, Anne remained an auditor for her entire 23-year career. When she retired in 1944, her annual salary was less than $4,000. When Anne retired, she had managed to save approximately $5,000. By any measure, this was not a fortune. It was a small nest egg from a lifetime of frugal living and disciplined saving. Most people in Anne's position would have lived modestly off Social Security and slowly depleted those savings. Anne made a different choice. She had spent 23 years auditing tax returns. She had read thousands of corporate financial statements. She had studied businesses for 2 decades. She understood, perhaps better than almost any woman of her generation, how American companies actually worked. She had observed which industries thrived through wars and recessions. She had watched executive compensation patterns, dividend histories, and profit margins. She took her $5,000 to a stockbroker named Norman, and she gave him 3 simple rules. Rule 1. Only invest in companies whose products you understand and use every day. Anne refused to invest in technology she didn't understand, in industries she hadn't studied, or in trendy startups making impressive promises. She bought stock in companies that made things she could see, touch, or use. Coca-Cola, because everyone drinks soft drinks. Sharing Plow, because everyone takes medicine. Chrysler, because everyone needs cars. Bristol-Myers, because everyone gets sick. These weren't exciting companies. They weren't growth darlings. They were the boring, profitable, durable businesses that quietly made money decade after decade. Anne understood something most investors never learn. You don't need exciting investments to build wealth. You need understandable investments held for a very long time. Rule 2. Never sell. Anne bought stocks and held them for decades, through stock market crashes, through recessions, through bear markets, through the Vietnam War, through the 1970s inflation crisis, through Black Monday in 1987, through every panic, every fear, every market dip. When ordinary investors were screaming and selling, Anne held. She understood that the magic of compound interest only works if you let it. Every time you sell, you reset the compounding clock. You also trigger capital gains taxes that destroy years of growth. Anne held her stocks for 51 years. By the end, the modest holdings she'd purchased for pennies were worth fortunes. Her Sharing Plow stock alone, purchased in the 1950s, became $7.5 million by 1995. Rule 3. Reinvest every dividend. This was perhaps Anne's most powerful discipline. Every quarterly dividend check that arrived in her mailbox, every single one, for 51 years, was immediately used to buy more shares of the same companies. She never spent a single dividend dollar on herself, not on a vacation, not on a nicer apartment, not on better furniture. Every dividend bought more shares, which generated more dividends, which bought more shares. This created what mathematicians call hyper-exponential growth. Over 5 decades, this discipline alone roughly tripled what her wealth would have been had she simply held the original shares without reinvestment. Anne understood that the dividends were not income to be consumed. They were fuel for the engine. Now you might be asking, how did Anne survive on virtually nothing while her portfolio grew into the millions? The answer is the deepest part of her story. Anne chose, quietly and deliberately, to live as if her money didn't exist. Her rent-controlled apartment cost less than $200 a month for most of her life. She prepared every meal at home. She walked everywhere or took the subway. She mended her own clothes. She read books from the public library. She never owned a car. She never went on vacation. She never ate at restaurants. She never bought anything she did not absolutely need. To outsiders, this looked like poverty. To Anne, it was freedom. She wasn't depriving herself. She was choosing what she actually valued: independence, security, and the quiet satisfaction of watching her work grow into something larger than herself. Anne never married. She never had children. She had outlived most of her siblings. As she entered her 90s, her thoughts turned to legacy. What she had built in secret over half a century would die with her unless she did something deliberate, so she did something profound. Anne contacted Yeshiva University, a Jewish institution she had no formal affiliation with. She had simply been moved by their mission of education. She made one specific request. Her entire estate would go to fund scholarships exclusively for women. The woman who had been denied promotion for 23 years because of her gender used her invisible fortune to ensure other women would get the opportunities she never received. Today, hundreds of women have graduated from Yeshiva University on Anne Scheiber scholarships. They are doctors, lawyers, scientists, professors. Anne never met a single one of them. She never wanted to. What can we actually learn from Anne Scheiber's life? I see 4 lessons that are profound. First, wealth doesn't require income. Anne never made more than $4,000 a year. The wealthy people you see flashing money on Instagram are often making 20 times Anne's salary and ending up financially destroyed. Income matters far less than what you do with it. Second, knowledge compounds, just like money. Anne's 23 years auditing tax returns wasn't wasted time. It was the foundation of her investment edge. The longer you study any subject, the more your insights compound. Third, discipline beats brilliance. Anne wasn't a finance genius. She wasn't a stock-picking savant. She was simply relentlessly disciplined. Buy what you understand. Never sell. Reinvest everything. 3 simple rules followed for 51 years. Fourth, quiet wealth is the only real wealth. Anne never needed anyone to validate her success. The validation lived in the numbers, in the discipline, and ultimately in the lives of the women she made possible. Anne Scheiber's story isn't a story about money. It's a story about who you choose to be when nobody is watching. Anne was watched by no one. She had no audience. She had no validation. She had no children to inherit her work. She had every reason to give up, spend it all, or live small. Instead, she quietly became one of the most extraordinary investors in American history and used her invisible fortune to give other women the futures she was denied. You don't need Anne's salary to do what Anne did. You don't need her credentials. You don't need her timing or her luck. You need 3 things: the discipline to buy what you understand, the patience to never sell, and the courage to reinvest every time, no matter how tempting it is to spend instead. Anne built $22 million on $4,000 a year and a refusal to do anything other than follow 3 simple rules. The rules still work. The math still works. The only question is whether you'll follow them for the next 50 years when nobody is watching. Your future self is watching. That's enough.